Hello, you're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and I'd like to welcome you to Flashbacks, the series where nostalgia is unleashed. This episode is part one of a four-parter on PBS Saturday night programming, which I watched as a child with my father and brothers. Today's episode, part one, will be on The Red-Green Show, which was a show from Canada, and it is Canada's longest-running comedy series to date, lasting 15 seasons with a total of 300 episodes, 5 specials, and a movie, as well as a live show currently on its final run. And also, it has a novel written by the main actor and creator. The show began its run in 1991 with a very limited budget. It was created by Steve Smith, who also starred as the lead role, Mr. Red Green. And it was also created by Rick Green, who also played the secondary character of Bill. The show was a mockumentary-style sketch comedy that also doubled as a sitcom. It is a show about manhood, brotherhood, getting old, and being a handyman. The show also shows how to half-ass everything you do, and is deeply philosophical in that respect. And personally, I've always felt that the show was very funny and was very memorable because I watched it with my dad as a kid. They just recently stopped showing it on PBS on Saturday nights, and it was really disappointing because it went on for, like 20 years, and the showing it on PBS, that is. And, I used to watch it every Saturday night with my dad, and then we would watch the other shows, which will be in parts, 2 through 4 of this 4-part special for our Flashback show. Now, the Red Green Show is, it's very a dry comedy. It's not very crude or witty per se, but it's very hard to explain. I recommend you watch it just to get a better understanding of how it is. And of course, I'm using Halo ODST footage of me doing really horrible on Legendary because, it was the most convenient footage for me to use, unfortunately. So, bear with me on the many times that I've died in this footage. But I originally made this footage to showcase how annoying escort levels are. But, that's irrelevant. And, at the end of the day, The Red Green Show, one of the best shows that I've ever watched. Probably the best show I've seen from Canada. One of the only shows I've seen from Canada, to be fair, but, Red Green is a Canadian redneck, and he's a DIYer, he does everything himself, and, uses a lot of duct tape. The movie is called Duct Tape Forever. I haven't seen that yet. I do own the full series on DVD in this big-ass box that looks like a toolbox. And, I plan to watch it all. I'm currently on Season 4. On our old DVR, I do have quite a bit of I used to have a bunch of episodes recorded, but we deleted them because they stopped showing it and stuff. But yeah, what else is there that can really be said about The Red Green Show? It's a one-of-a-kind show. It's mostly a sketch comedy, but around Season 2, they did have those sitcom elements, as I said. The shows are formulaic per season. Each season has its own formula that is different from the last. They're all very similar, but each season does have its own formula. And, at the end of the day, I really recommend the show, and I will see you in part 2. Hi guys! No, I'm just joking. I'm not one of those dumbasses that starts a video with hi guys. I hate people that do that. But anyway, you're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and before I move on to this episode of Flashbacks, I'd just like to say a few things about last episode's topic. First off, I forgot to mention that every episode of The Red Green Show has been officially uploaded to YouTube. I left a link to it in the description of the previous video, but I will also leave one in this video. the description of this video. But I will... Secondly, the book for The Red Green Show isn't really a novel, it's more of a faux DIY guide, much like Handyman's Corner itself. It's called How to Do Everything, and I definitely recommend it. Now, on to Flashbacks, PBS shows Part 2. Red Dwarf. Red Dwarf is my favorite show, and the show that ignited my obsession with British comedy. It is the best way to describe the show is the description on the DVD box. Now that description is described thusly, as it reads: Chicken Soup Machine Repairman and intergalactic loser Dave Lister awakes from suspended animation to discover that he is the lone survivor of a radiation leak and is now 3 million years into deep space and the last surviving member of the human race. Dave is soon joined by a hologram of his dead bunkmate, a life form who evolved from his pet cat and a neurotic sanitation android. Together, this unlikely bunch of heroes attempt to find their way back to Earth under the guidance of Holly, the ship's senile computer, encountering a whole heap of smeg along the way. Not really a better way to describe the show other than that. You know, pretty descriptive, I would say, that description. Now, Red Dwarf started in 1988 as a character-driven comedy that just happened to be in space. There were no aliens. There are no aliens in Red Dwarf. Instead, they have mechanoids, which are human servant droids, simulants, which are war droids that hate humans and kill them and torture them and stuff like that. They have Gelfs, which are genetically engineered life forms created by humans for entertainment, but now they live on their own.
I am the one who will destroy.
The idea was to create a sci-fi show with as little sci-fi as possible. This, of course, was changed in later series. There was a 3-year gap between Series 6 and Series 7, excuse me. But that's not as bad as the 11-year gap between the release of Seasons 8 and 9. Originally, the show ended on a cliffhanger which has yet to be resolved. In 1998, that's when the cliffhanger was 1998. But then the show was revived in 2009 for Series 9, which was a 3-part miniseries called Back to Earth. And Series 10 came out in 2012. They have scheduled Series 11 and 12 for 2016 and 2017 to air, respectively. There are, to date, 61 episodes of Red Dwarf. But if they keep the trends up with the number of episodes per season, there will be at least 73 by the end of Season 12. Now, one thing that is common in Red Dwarf is inconsistency. It's loaded with inconsistency and retcon. For instance, in Season 1 of the Red Dwarf launched in 2077, in the 21st century. But in Season 7, Lister was born in 21-something or other. I can't remember the exact date, but it was in the 22nd century. But every other season besides that has taken place in the 23rd century. Granted, they are 3 million years past whatever time it initially started, so it's not like, you know, that's a big concern, but...
This would be a good time to test the power.
You know, it's inconsistent. In Seasons 1 and 2, Lister hardly knew Kochanski. In fact, they had only shared 174 words in total. But, by Season 4 and up, they had decided that apparently they had like a 3-week or 3-month, I can't remember exactly which, relationship before she dumped him. The number of crew jumps from 169 to 1169, and even 100,000 in the novels. Just to name a few inconsistencies. There are 4 Red Dwarf novels: Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, Better Than Life, Backwards, and Last Human. Though the first 2, Better Than Life is a direct sequel to Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, and they are the same continuity, Whereas Backwards and Last Human are two separate sequels, two alternate sequels for Better Than Life. Also, they made Craig Charles wrote a book called The Log, which is another faux guide that he wrote about how to survive in space. Has nothing to do with Red Dwarf itself, but it's called The Log, A Dwarfer's Guide to Everything, and I definitely recommend that as well. There are two failed US pilots. One of them was similar to the original show and tried to stay faithful, but was still shite. In fact, Robert Llewellyn actually was in that one. But then the second one was even worse, where they had a female cat who was supposed to be a badass rather than a dumbass, and it just did not work. And, that's, pretty much all there is to say about Red Dwarf. I'm looking forward to seasons 11 and 12 coming out in the next couple of years, which, that'll be good. Now, as you can tell, the footage I've used here is Dragon Ball Xenoverse. And, yes, it's a fun game, and I recommend that too on an unrelated note. Part 3 will be, obviously, another PBS show, as is customary. I'm kind of rambling on right now. I apologize for that, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Enjoy the rest of this footage if you want. That's it for my voiceover, and I will see you in Part 3.
Here I go! Right and right, left and left, spin and turn and... great big smile! Impressive. You were better than I expected.
Hello and welcome to Flashbacks, the series where things are nostalgic. I am your host, Fugitive Red-Eye, and unlike the previous two parts in this four-parter, this third part is something I no longer really watch, and it is Doctor Who. It was shown on PBS at night, and it was the main feature for me as a child. I would watch The Red Green Show, then Red Dwarf, all in anticipation for Doctor Who. I no longer care for the series because it is stale and way dragged out to me. The only seasons I really liked were the Tom Baker seasons anyway. It's a sci-fi series, very long, very many people like it. I personally don't anymore. The intro is still nostalgic, but I would probably not go back and rewatch the series. Now, that's pretty much all I have to say about Doctor Who. But if you're wondering what Part 3 is, what the next part will be, Part 4, here's a hint.
I present my cunning plan.
You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and this is our finale to our Flashbacks 4-parter on Saturday night PBS shows I watched as a child. The thing that sets this episode apart from the first three entries is that as a kid I did not really like this show. My dad would watch it, but I would usually fall asleep. But as I got older, I gave this show another chance, and I loved it. That show is Blackadder. Britain's wittiest sitcom, a show that relies mostly on witty, intelligent humor, which I didn't get as a kid, but it is now one of my favorite shows. It stars Rowan Atkinson. For those of you who don't know, Rowan Atkinson is the guy who played Mr. Bean. Blackadder is a completely different show than Mr. Bean, and is, in my opinion, superior. It's smart humor, and it is underrated in its own right. Sure, it's fairly well known, but many people prefer Mr. Bean. If you get a chance, I recommend you check out Blackadder. I believe the whole series is still on Netflix, including the Christmas special, although I have heard it's not, but last time I checked it was still there. If not, I know it is on Hulu. The show consisted of 24 episodes and 3 specials, I believe. And the show itself was a really good show, and it had a lot of potential. Each season was set in a different time period, starring the same main character, just as either a reincarnation or a sort of carry-on of a lineage. I prefer to think of it as a reincarnation just because the characters are usually similar. Other than the first season, which I think was actually the best season, even though in the UK it's actually the least favored season. The first season, Edmund, that's the main character, Edmund Blackadder, isn't quite as intelligent as he is in later seasons, but he's still pretty cunning in his own right. I mean, he's kind of dumb, but he's more weaselly and cowardly, and honestly that makes him more likable in some weird way. Another thing is that as the series progressed, each season Edmund would get smarter, but he would become lower class. For instance, in the first season he was a prince, in the second he was a lord, in the third a butler, and in the fourth a lowly soldier in the trenches of World War I. Each season, like I said, is a different time period, the first being medieval, the second being the Renaissance, third being the American Revolution, and the fourth being World War I. The show itself does a nice job of satirizing the different time periods and views there, as well as making all sorts of jokes that no one would get, like references to things that actually happened in those time periods. So it's nice and refreshing to see a show that actually goes into so much depth. I mean, I know there were some historical inaccuracies. For instance, in Season 3, the Prince Regent is skinny, even though he was supposed to be incredibly fat and much older at the time. Whereas, another thing is in the movie, or final special rather, Blackadder Back and Forth, when they go back in time to Hadrian's Wall, it's only 3 feet tall, but studies have shown that the wall itself actually was much taller before being destroyed. But historical inaccuracies aside, I consider Blackadder to be a great show, and a nice look into history, even if it is inaccurate. Another thing that sets it apart, or that makes it really good, is Blackadder and his sidekick Baldric are in every single episode. Baldric is fairly intelligent in the first season, but each season he gets stupider, whereas the opposite effect on Edmund. Baldric is, he's different. He has this obsession with turnips, and he has the thingy shaped like a turnip. His words. Really good show. Really underrated. Probably my favorite episode would be the Witch Smeller Pursuivant, which is about Edmund being accused of being a witch. It's pretty funny, and it satirizes just how ridiculous different witch trials and things were during medieval times and whatnot. I would definitely recommend checking it out. The Christmas special, known as Blackadder's Christmas Carol, is of course a parody of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. The other specials are Blackadder the Cavalier Years, which is about the death of King Richard I. Or not King Richard I, I mean King Richard IV, sorry. No, it was King Edward I. It was one of those old kings. I'm sorry, I'm not good on my monarch history. But anyways, then the final special was, of course, Blackadder Back and Forth. There was also an unaired pilot, which was never released, but I have seen it, and you can find it. It's pretty interesting, too. It's actually was remade into a Season 1 episode, but has a slightly different tone, and has a different Baldric, weird enough. It's pretty interesting. I would recommend you check it out. And tune in next time.